Pulumi is a great tool when you have developers that are comfortable in the programming languages that they work with every day to use that as an infrastructure as code tool. In this video, we're going to see how to use Pulumi. We're going to spin up an EKS cluster in AWS. We're going to do that with the Pulumi CLI, and then we'll see how to do that with env0. My name is Sam Gabriel, and let's get started. All right, I am in Visual Studio Code right here, and if you don't have Pulumi installed locally, you can run this command as you see here. So I can run this, and that should run a script for me that will install Pulumi for me with the version that I want, and I already have that. So if I run Pulumi version, I should see Pulumi running in my local environment. Next, we're going to create a new directory, and I'm actually going to change the name a little bit here. I'm going to call it Pulumi EKS, and then change the directory into Pulumi EKS, and then run the command Pulumi new, and then Kubernetes AWS Python. This is a template that is provided to us from Pulumi, and I'll show you the details of this template very shortly. So project name Pulumi EKS, accept that. A Python program to deploy Kubernetes cluster in AWS, that looks good as a description. What do I want to call this stack, Pulumi stack? I'll call it dev as is recommended here. And then it gives me a few questions. The desired cluster size, I'm going to say 2. That's the number of nodes in the cluster. The instance type, I'm going to go with T2 small. The max cluster size, I'll go with 3, and the minimum cluster size, I'll go with 1. And then the subnet or the CIDR block for my new VPC, I'm just going to leave it as is. The AWS region, I want US East 1. And that should save my configuration, and we should be just ready to go here. The Pulumi CLI is going to go ahead and install all the dependencies for Python that I need to get this project started. So it's really neat that there are so many available templates that we can run with, as opposed to starting with a clean slate and trying to start from scratch to build the resources that we need. So now it says your new project is ready to go. I see a new folder created for me, Pulumi EKS. And I see a number of things here. I see a virtual environment for Python, which is amazing. So I don't have to worry about my install of Python. I'm just going to use this virtual environment. I see a main.py, so a main.python file right here. It's about 40 lines of code. And it looks pretty neat. You can see here it has a bunch of configured variables. So the ones that we just specified: minimum cluster size, maximum cluster size, desired cluster size, EKS node, instance type, VPC network CIDR. And then I have create a VPC. So we're creating a new VPC here, and I can see that I'm importing AWS SX and Pulumi EKS. This is the package that I'll show you later, the template package, which allows me to create a cluster very easily with this command here. As you can see, EKS.cluster, and then we name it EKS cluster. And I have a bunch of variables that I'm filling up here: VPC ID, which is the VPC that I created up here, public subnet IDs, private subnet IDs, and instance type, desired capacity, minimum size, maximum size, node associated public IP address, endpoint private access, endpoint public access, and so on. So I've got this. Of course, this is kind of a boilerplate. Nothing has run yet. I haven't configured or haven't provisioned any resources as of yet. Now, pulumi.dev.yaml is a configuration file that allows me to see the, it basically filled out whatever I created in the wizard, or the options I gave it in the wizard. As you can see, the different variables here. And then pulumi.yaml file is just internal to Pulumi, the name of the stack or project, the runtime is Python. I'm using a virtual environment and a description for my program. And then I have a requirements.txt file for my Python. So I got my requirements file right here. So that all looks amazing. Very good. Let's clear over here and we should be good to go. Now, I already have my AWS credentials in my AWS config or credentials file on my machine. If you don't, you can just run these two commands to export your AWS access key ID and secret access key as environment variables, and you're good to go. So all we need to do here is run Pulumi up, and that should run a preview to show us what Pulumi is about to do. And you can see here is a bunch of things that's going to happen. We're creating a VPC, and we have a bunch of subnets, and we've got a routing table, route table association, a route, internet gateway. Got another subnet. So these are private subnets, and I've got a public subnet here, 3 public subnets, 3 private subnets. So it's really taking care of all the networking for me, this VPC cluster resource. And think of a cluster resource as a module in Terraform, if you will. And then we got the cluster, the EKS cluster. As you can see, it's doing a bunch of things as well. I've got some cluster roles. I've got some instance roles, and I've got some security group here, a security group rule. Here's the EKS cluster, an instance profile. I've got a bunch of security group rules as well, and I'm utilizing CloudFormation, it seems, as well. It's really a lot of this I would have had to wire myself and actually write the resource code for myself. So really this template has done a lot of the work for me. So I'm going to answer yes to this prompt and get Pulumi to start creating the resources here for me. So as you can see, it started creating. Now this can take up to from 10 to 20 minutes. It does take a while, and it's not really reflecting badly on Pulumi. It's just that's the time it takes to spin up an EKS cluster. This is really on AWS, right? So you can see here some of the resources already got created. And if I go over here to my Pulumi dashboard and go under stacks, let me refresh this. Under stacks, I see my Pulumi EKS stack. Here's the stack called dev. Sorry, this is the project. This is the stack called dev. And if you go under here, you can start to see the deployments. The updates. So this is the update that's already running as well. So it's reflecting exactly what I'm seeing in the CLI. And once we're done, we'll see our outputs come out here. All right, so I'll let that run for a bit. In the meantime, let me show you around a little bit the Pulumi templates, which is really, really great. So under Pulumi templates, you can see all kinds of templates to get started. So let's see, Kubernetes cluster templates. Here's the one I worked on, Kubernetes cluster on AWS. It kind of gives you a brief overview what will spin up. And again, the beauty of Pulumi is the actual flexibility in terms of what programming language you run with, right? So even within the documentation itself, you can see you can use Python, Go, TypeScript, and so on. And then it shows you, how to deploy this project. This is basically what we did. Pulumi new, and then use the template name Kubernetes AWS Python. Some of the values here to customize our project, as you saw before. And that's great from here. But really what I like is the packages. So if we go under the documentation or the Pulumi.com registry, so the registry of Pulumi, and from here, if you go back to just back here, all packages or docs. So docs will give you the individual resources that you can run with. So if I go under AWS, for example, and guides, I can see all the different resources. If I want to run Lambda, for example, how do I do that? So these are some guides, right? But if I'm interested in packages, which again, this is kind of like running with best practices, I can spin up, or I can look for EKS here, and I can see Amazon EKS. And from here, I get what I saw on the previous screen with the templates. But now I have more details. So I can see that with Amazon EKS, I have a bunch of resources here. So under cluster, I can see that I have a lot of options here. So here's the minimum size, maximum size, a lot of other options that we didn't specify that we can obviously use. Here's the public subnets that we saw before. And here's the version. I didn't specify the version of Kubernetes. Obviously, I can change that. I can specify that here. And then all the inputs with the description for all of these inputs found here as well, right? So it's really, really neat. The documentation is excellent. You'll see the outputs as well, what you can output from this cluster. And we're outputting the kube config, and we're outputting the VPC ID. So I think here, I believe we're running, maybe we're running with VPC CNI. No, I think we're running VPC from a different package. But you can do things like manage node group, for example. If you don't like the defaults that we used, you can use a managed node group here. Once again, just change the language as you wish. And yeah, all the inputs are available, and the outputs as well, right? So that's kind of briefly what I wanted to show you of how you can navigate the documentation, look for different packages, and go from there. All right, let's see how far we've gotten. I think I'm going to have to pause the video, but let's just double check and see. Yep, we're still creating. We are creating our cluster here, and I think we're down at the actual cluster itself being created. So pretty much everything, almost everything else got created. We're just waiting for that EKS cluster to come up. So I'll pause the video and we'll come back once it's done. All right, looks like it's complete, and we have duration is 12 minutes and 43 seconds at the bottom. I see my VPC ID, and here's my kube config. So now I can go ahead and check my Kubernetes cluster. So I can run this command. And what this is going to do is going to echo the output, the Pulumi stack output, into this file called mykubeconfig. If we open this file, it will show me the kube config that allows me to access the cluster. So if I clear here and I run export kubeconfig and reference my kubeconfig, I can now run kubectx, which shows me the context. I'm using the AWS here context, and kubeNS allows me to see my namespaces. So I've got here my kube system, for example, and I can run kubectl get nodes, and you can see I've got 2 nodes here. Let's go with the option wide. So I can see I have 2 nodes running Amazon Linux 2, running containerd, and we're good to go. I can see the 2 EC2 instances, the IDs of those 2 EC2 instances. And if I really want to see everything in this namespace, see all the pods running, and yeah, we have a Kubernetes cluster running in AWS. This is an EKS cluster, all created via Pulumi. If we were to jump into the dashboard here in Pulumi and refresh this, you can see it succeeded, and once again we see our outputs, the kubeconfig and the VPC ID. Here's our configuration, and any tags that we have here, these are all tagged for us automatically. And we have 66 resources that Pulumi created for us, so we can dig deeper into each one of those. And it's actually pretty neat that we can see the this would take us, actually it didn't work. This is internal. But I think any one of these will take us to the AWS resource itself. So this should take us to our VPC. And here's our EKS VPC. If we go back and take a look at our cluster, for example, the EKS cluster, I don't think there's a link to it. Maybe this is the one. Oh, okay, that's the actual endpoint. But I have it open here for us anyways. If we go to the EKS cluster under clusters, and let's refresh this, should be able to see my cluster right here. And I can see the networking under this cluster, the subnets, the VPC, and so on. So this is fantastic. Got Pulumi to stand up a cluster for us, no problem here. And again, it was pretty straightforward, minimal effort on my part. You know, found the template, grabbed it. Now I can tweak the template as much as I want. Once again, it's all in this main.py file. I'm very familiar with Python. I can run with it and do what I need to do. So to clean up, it's very simple. You just run Pulumi destroy. And again, this will prompt you, make sure that you want to destroy the resources that we created. So we have 60 to delete. We can say yes. And that is going to go ahead and delete this cluster for us. Now, while this deletes, what I want to show you now is how we can do all this with env0. So if we jump back into our console here and we go to env0, now you can create a new project. I already have a project, so I'm not going to create a new one, but to create a new project, go to projects, create new project, and go from there. I already have a project created. I also have a template created, and I can show you my template here, this EKS template. As you can see, one of the beautiful thing about env0 is the ability to utilize any of the infrastructure as code frameworks that you see on the screen here. OpenTofu, Terraform, TerraGrunt, CloudFormation, Pulumi, Kubernetes, Helm, Workflow. So any of these, and in this case I'm using Pulumi. I'm giving the template a name. I'm selecting a particular Pulumi version. Then in the VCS section, I'm tying this to my GitHub repo where I just showed you my files. And the branch is main, and then the Pulumi folder is Pulumi EKS. And then the variables, I just need to put my Pulumi access token. This allows env0 to access the Pulumi backend. And then under projects, I just want to make sure that the template is allowed in particular in my EKS demo project. I just added it to all my projects so I can access this template from any of my projects. So now I go to project environments, and under actually project settings, I need to always remember to show you this because I forget it a lot. The AWS credentials, we need to make sure that you have AWS access credentials enabled here so you can reference it. Now, if you don't have credentials for AWS, then you have to go from the global organizational settings and go to credentials, and then add your credentials here. These are my AWS credentials right here. And that's how I'm tying that to the particular project I'm in. All right, go to project environments. Let's create a new environment based on a template. And already my EKS template shows up here. And let's go ahead and run this. Now I can give this a stack. Let's call this my EKS stack, for example, from env0, like that. I can enable drift detection once an hour. I can say, hey, I'm going to make sure I want to destroy this environment in, let's say, 12 hours, 6 hours. Let's say 6 hours in case I forget to destroy it. It will automatically destroy for me, which is great when you want to run ephemeral environments. Under variables, it's just going to grab my template variables. Of course, I can add local variables here for my project only. And approve plan automatically. I'm going to leave it unselected so that I can review the plan before it actually executes. So we go ahead and click run. And while this runs, I'll show you one important thing when we're running with env0, and this is the env0.yaml file right here at the root of my repo. And what this is doing is it's actually using a pre-hook here at the Pulumi preview stage. Just before Pulumi preview, it is changing directory into my Pulumi EKS folder right here, and it's running this command pulumi config set all, and it's setting my configuration variables. So the AWS region, the env0 desired cluster size, the EKS node instance type, maximum and minimum cluster size, and also the VPC network CIDR block. All right, so that is equivalent to what we saw in here when we were running Pulumi from the CLI, right? So all I'm doing is, because I'm using env0, I'm running this as a pre-hook, and I'm using just a shell here, a CLI command to feed that into Pulumi so that it knows what configuration variables to use when it runs my main.py file. Okay, so that's important to note. All right, let's see how we're doing here. We're in the Pulumi preview phase. So it is running here. You can see that it's installing my dependencies. Here's the before Pulumi stage, right? So I ran that command there. Initializing, setting the Pulumi version, loading any variables I might have. So the access token, for example, Pulumi access token gets loaded here as an environment variable. Here are the AWS access keys. And of course, we're getting a working environment, and we're cloning my GitHub repo, right? So this is all running inside of Pulumi's own environment. And it's continuing to run here. You can see already completed. You got 60 resources to create. It's just finishing up here before I can click the approve button. And as you can see here, all the resources that are going to get created. From the CLI, I didn't bother running preview, but it's always a good practice to run preview, and out of the box, Pulumi does that for us. All right, we're good to go. Let's approve this, and this will take us to the next step, which is the Pulumi up step, and this is the actual step that actually provisions resources inside of AWS. All right, so this is just waiting to execute, and I hope that my other cluster is already destroyed by now, so we don't run into any conflicts. And it is perfect. So the local CLI cluster that I created from the local CLI is deleted successfully, and now we're ready to go. Here's Pulumi up, and once again, this will take some time, so I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back when it successfully completes. All right, looks like it's completed, and it already took us to the resources tab here, where we can see our kubeconfig and VPC ID as our outputs. Also, all the resources here can be seen as well that have been provisioned. And if you're curious to go back and look at the deployment logs, we can always go back here and look at the Pulumi up and the Pulumi stack output as well, just as we would see it in the CLI. All right, so basically we just need to copy our kubeconfig. We can go back to our Visual Studio Code, and in our my kubeconfig here, let's delete this and let's put the new one in here. And now, since we've already exported our kubeconfig, we should be able to once again run kubectx, select AWS, kubectl, get nodes, and this should once again give us an output similar to what we saw before, but this time we did everything through env0. And the beauty about using env0 this way is that now you can have multiple teams, some teams using Terraform, some teams using OpenTofu, others using Pulumi or Kubernetes, and you're not restricting your organization to a particular infrastructure as code framework. Not only that, of course, we have drift detection. We have time left to 6 hours, as you can see. So ephemeral environments and a lot of features that come with env0. So I hope that this demo has helped you to see how you can use Pulumi and the benefits of using Pulumi in, using whatever programming language you're used to be able to spin up the resources in that particular language, and also how you can use env0 with Pulumi to provision your resources. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.